Hey guys, welcome back to another video. I'm your host, That One Camera Guy, and in this episode we're going to be talking about shooting youth wrestling sports. First of all, I am not the definitive expert when it comes to shooting wrestling. I recently shot some wrestling and I wanted to share with you my experience and what I've learned over time, but I'm really just sharing you my limited experience that I've had with this sport and just giving you some guidance and tips to kind of get you going. With that out of the way, let's jump into this. Number one, camera gear. We all love to talk about camera gear and getting the latest and greatest. My recommendation is buy what you can afford. But as far as camera gear goes, when shooting wrestling, consider getting cameras with high FPS. You want to stick with that 6 to 10 frames per second zone. I am going to say you can shoot with cameras with lower FPS and you're going to get great shots anyway, but your frequency of getting greater shots does get better with higher frames per second cameras. What ends up happening is the camera is more responsive taking those photos, and with a slower FPS camera, you're just not going to get that responsiveness you need. But it doesn't mean you can't time your photos and still get amazing shots. Number two, lens choices. The lenses I typically go with is a 70 to 200 f2.8. I go with also an 85 f1.4, f1.8, and also even a wide angle lens like a 35 or even a 1740 that I bring with me to these events. You're going to want the 70 to 200 to give you enough reach. You'll want the 85 prime lens for darker venues, and you want the wide angle lenses to kind of get some sports action shots of groups huddling or some sort of celebratory situation. Number three, lighting. Gym lighting varies from venue to venue. You never know how one school have their lighting set up. So if you are at a brighter location, using a crop censored camera will be okay. I tend to use a 70 to 200 f2.8 on a crop censored camera and it does really well for me. If I was at a darker environment or darker school, or maybe they dimmed the lights down, I would use a prime lens like an 85 or a 135 to get not only more light into my camera, but be able to keep my shutter speed higher with a faster prime lens. With a full frame camera, you can definitely shoot in darker environments, and you can stick with the 70 to 200 f2.8 and still get some great shots. And again, you can switch over to a prime lens to kind of change it up a little bit. Number four, settings. I always shoot manual mode. The first thing I do is determine the shutter speed that I need to get the photos that I want. In this case, it's sports, so I'm gonna shoot around 400 to 1000 for my shutter speed. Since lighting is always variable at these types of events, I tend to shoot at a much lower shutter speed, around 400, and 400 to 500 is usually the range I go to. From there, I base my ISO and my aperture. Aperture, I'm going to keep it usually as low as I can keep it. 1.4 to 2.8 is the case that I'll be at. ISO is the one that I vary based on the overall lighting. Number five, when it comes to technique, my recommendation is to find a spot and stick to it. Please be kind and avoid blocking anybody's view. It's usually a good idea. The other thing is to keep low to the ground. It's very similar to the recommendations when you're shooting for football. If you stay low to the ground and you take your shots, you're gonna make your subjects look bigger and more daunting in those shots, and they're gonna look better. Sometimes I was laying on the floor taking photos. Occasionally I was just sitting down, crisscross or whatever, to shoot photos. It just depends on what you're comfortable with. Try doing both and see how it looks. Number six, timing. Just like any type of photography you do, practice makes perfect. I didn't do wrestling in high school, so I don't really know the ins and outs. But with practice, you'll start to learn and see when to press that trigger button on your shutter. But that just happens with practice. You tend to know where referees go. You tend to know how certain athletes act or how certain moves take place. So over time, you will get better at it. Just keep at it and it'll improve. Number seven, autofocus. Many modern DSLRs have really great autofocus systems built into them already. I tend to just stick to a servo mode and then set the center point as my main autofocus point. I tend to go up to the sides, down to the left, whatever, occasionally to get better framing. But for the most part, center point works best for me. I keep my eye on the viewfinder and I just kind of hold half press to keep the autofocus going. And as soon as I see something interesting happen, I press that shutter button down. And that's usually how I kind of tackle it. Number eight, flash. I don't typically use flash at these types of events, but I know if you're gonna shoot for like a professional organization like Max Preps, or you wanna sell your prints, you're gonna have to use flash for some types of situations. Most of these events are used to having flash done. My recommendation is just make sure you ask the officials or the referees just to kind of check in with them. I do shoot with another person that does use flash frequently with most of their events. 90% of the time or 100% of the time, most officials don't care, they're okay with it. And he's even asked wrestlers whether it bothered them, and most of them practically said no. So don't be worried too much about using flash if you really need to, especially if your camera really struggles with low light. With that out of the way, let me talk about a recent wrestling match that I shot. It's been over a year since I last shot one, since wrestling's seasonal. But the first thing I noticed at this venue was that the lighting was pretty good. I went and got my 7D Mark II out and the 70-200 and quickly did some test shots, and I realized that I was going to be able to shoot at a shutter speed of 4 to 500 at 2.8 with the ISO of 3200, which was perfect for my camera. I also went ahead and mounted a Sigma 35 f1.4 on my 5D Mark III, so I brought with me 2 bodies with me that day. I went ahead and located myself next to the officials table, and I put my 2 cameras there. I left my big bulky bag far away, and I did bring with me my little GoPro on a Gorilla Pod. Once I got set up, I went ahead and laid down and got ready to do my shooting, and then I also sat down as well, so I kind of varied it up from time to time. Overall, from the entire experience I had shooting at that event, I felt I didn't get as many great pictures as I thought I would have gotten. Some of it just tends to be, your luck when it comes to shooting, and also timing. I felt that there were some times I was on the wrong side, maybe an action was happening, but either the referee was blocking me or I couldn't see the action from the perspective I was at. So that tends to happen a lot. Again, like I said, timing is very important, so you got to work on that as well. And like I said, sometimes it's just the luck of the draw. Maybe you get a really cool action that happens, someone being lifted or pinned down or tossed, and you're at the right spot for it. Well, that's it. Those are all my recommendations and tips when it comes to shooting wrestling. If you do have any questions about gear or anything else, please post them down below and I'll see what I can do to help you out. With that said, I'm your host, That One Camera Guy, and I'll catch you on the next video. Now, if you did like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. I'd really appreciate it because it helps me out. And if you do enjoy the videos I am producing on my channel, consider subscribing. And if you missed the last video I did about shooting dances, you can find the annotations next to me or click the little eye icon up there on top. And I will catch you guys later. Bye.